Happy Independence Day, a day we recognize the beautiful honor of living in a country whose foundational principle is freedom. And yet we celebrate this year under the most unusual of circumstances, the oppression of a pandemic and echoes of protests still heard across the land. Nonetheless, in worship today, we will hold up the idea that as God has shaped our nearly 250 years of American history, God is still doing the same. Hello, I'm Tim, pastor developer of Hope Palm Springs, and I want to welcome you to worship. Thanks again for joining us, and if it's your first time, I invite you to check us out and to become a part of this exciting new faith community in the desert. Well, as a faith community, we're hanging in there during this unusual time. And while we had hoped that somewhere mid-July we would be able to gather for in-person worship, the recent surge in the virus has put that plan on hold. However, we are trying some new things, and one of those is we gather here at Wellness Park. We gather on Sunday mornings at 7:30 a.m. We gather early to beat the heat. We bring a long chair or a blanket to sit on. We social distance. We wear our masks. And we simply enjoy the beauty of one another's presence. If you are well and comfortable with that idea, I invite you to join us. If not, I want you to know we also have a fellowship time that is online later on Sunday mornings. So let me now invite you simply to center your heart, your mind, your whole self on the presence of God, for God is with you. And while we may not be able to gather this 4th of July weekend for in-person worship, or even have those barbecues that we love to have with family and friends, we can still honor the holy significance of what Independence Day stands for. For the Creator has given all people rights that are unalienable, inherent to our being, our very birthright as persons, a truth recognized in our country's governing documents. And this is where the strength of freedom lies. It is the right of the human spirit, not a privilege granted by any government. It is a gift from God. Welcome to virtual worship. The Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew, the 11th chapter. Jesus said, "But to what will I compare this generation? It is like children sitting in the marketplaces and calling to one another, 'We played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We wailed, and you did not mourn.' For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, 'Look, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners.' Yet wisdom is vindicated by her deeds." At that time Jesus said, "I thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and the intelligent and have revealed them to infants. Yes, Father, for such was your gracious will. All things have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." Here ends the reading. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. So begins Charles Dickens' novel, A Tale of Two Cities, describing a time of controversy and contradiction. Dickens refers to two cities, Paris and London, during the tumultuous environment of the French Revolution. This proclamation of revolution for oppressed civilians really turned out to be for them a spring of hope. But for an ancient regime and outgoing political systems, this revolution was like a winter of despair leading to death and destruction. The great literary value of Dickens' words compare and contrast two situations and environments, and it tells about a time of chaos, a time of conflict and despair. It also tells of a time of happiness. Well, it is an unsettling time for us, to say the least. The headlines speak about a dramatic surge with daily coronavirus cases topping 50,000 in our country. Disturbing videos of police violence against Black and brown Americans and against those who are protesting such violence continue to be in the news. And there are millions of Americans out of work. And there is widespread uncertainty about what the coming months will bring, especially as a contentious and vitally important presidential election looms on the horizon. Well, given all this, it's not surprising that a recent survey finds that Americans are more unhappy now than at any time in the last 50 years. And many of you with whom I've spoken this past week, you've used the same word when I ask you how you are. Discouraged, you have said to me. It is a heavy time. Not just in Minnesota, where George Floyd died under the knee of a casually brutal cop. Not just in the United States, where social, political, public health, and economic turmoil seems to engulf the nation. It is a heavy time around the world, as the pandemic continues to take a huge toll in lives lost and economies severely weakened. It would seem that even though temperatures here in Palm Springs routinely top 100 degrees, that we are, to use Dickens' words, in the winter of our despair. But is there any spring of hope? Also, to use Dickens' words. Is there any spring of hope alongside this winter of despair? I want to suggest to you on this Independence Day weekend that we are truly a nation at the gate, and that we are passing into a new era, a time of which history is never exactly known. And as we move through this gate, we move from one reality to another, from the known into the unknown. And the question is, what will we bring with us as we pass through this gate? With what will we equip ourselves as we prepare for an uncertain future? So allow me to ask your opinion. Do you think we live in a great nation? A great nation called America, that is the land of the free and home of the brave, a nation that stands firmly on the founding principles of the Declaration of Independence that was signed 244 years ago? Or is it your opinion that we live in a nation that has compromised its values, sold out its founding convictions, a troubled country beset by problems, hate, and violence? If you are wise, You said yes to both those questions, indicating that you have not chosen one opinion over the exclusion of the other. For if all you see is good, then you are ignorant of much. And if all you see is bad, then you are ignorant of much. For as in a tale of two cities, we too can hold on to two polar opposites, two ideas that seem diametrically opposed to each other. It's called a paradoxical injunction. And basically, a paradoxical injunction replaces the word or for the word and. In other words, we do live in a beautiful country that experiences more freedom than most countries in the world, and many know oppression and the smothering brutality of power-hungry persons and systems that steal away freedoms and the rights of many. We can both love this country in which we live and be disgusted by its apparent lack of responding and preserving all people's rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We can say, I am proud to be an American, and I am sometimes embarrassed to admit I am an American. We can say that America is a great nation and a troubled nation too. It's the best place to live, and sometimes I'd like to move to Canada. You see, to give up one of those ideas for the other, to use the word or instead of the word and in any of those statements, is to tell perhaps only half the truth. But we can speak fullness of truth even when part of that truth seems to contradict a truth on the other side. We can hold together both ideas in tension even though they seem to contradict each other. A paradoxical injunction. The same is true for the person of faith. Yes, we can look at the world and say, it's all going to hell in a handbasket, and at the same time see holy moments where heaven bends down and touches the earth. The person of faith can say, I hate wearing a mask, and for the sake of those I'm called to love, even those I don't even know, I will still wear it. The person of faith can say, I am terribly disheartened by how I see people treating each other, and yet I believe in the goodness of humanity. The person of faith can even say, I don't see it getting any better. It all just seems so hopeless. And I also believe that God places within each day a potential for miracle and goodness that allows me still to say, so I will embrace this day with passion and a hopeful attitude. A paradoxical injunction. It's not a foreign concept to us as people of faith, believers in God. I mean, there's always been the paradox of light in the midst of darkness, of being both lost and found, saint and sinner, sinner and redeemed. Much of faith is based on contrary ideas like discovering life in the midst of death, joy in the midst of sorrow, of suffering, resurrection through crucifixion, the healing of brokenness by one who was broken on the cross. Contrary ideas where one would seem to exclude the other, but not for people of faith. We can hang on to both. And this is the wisdom that Jesus speaks about in today's gospel lesson. Jesus speaks to a generation of his time, and it seems it could just as easily be addressed to our generation too. For Jesus describes a generation that cannot recognize the truth that is right in front of them. They thought that John the Baptist was a demon and considered Jesus to be a glutton and a drunkard. Jesus, on the other hand, compares them to children. They are oblivious I mean, like children who are preoccupied with playing games according to the lesson. The Messiah, the one they had been waiting for, is right in front of them, and yet they fail to see it. In response to that, Jesus speaks of wisdom. And this wisdom brings clarification. Wisdom grants us the ability to understand beyond our sensory perception. And on the contrary, those who lack wisdom are fools. And Jesus compares them to children playing in the marketplace who lack understanding. But wisdom beckons all to a feast she has prepared and warns against foolishness. She calls, as it says in Proverbs chapter 9, "Come, eat of my bread and drink of the wine I have mixed. Lay aside immaturity and live and walk in the way of insight." However, this is also a cautionary tale, because just as wisdom calls out to us, so too does foolishness. We must choose. Will we live with insight to the truth, or in foolishness and ignorance? If we are what I say we are, a nation at the gate, then critical to these moments is what we choose to take with us as we pass through that gate. Will it be wisdom that accompanies us? Or will it be foolishness? As we pass through this gate, we will undoubtedly carry with us the fear and uncertainty that comes with a pandemic. We will carry experiences of illness and, for many, memories of death. In addition, we will carry the burden of more work to do in regards to systemic inequality in this country and scars of the woundedness created by prejudice and hate. On this Independence Day, these are just some of the things that make up the winter of our despair. But in wisdom, let us carry also at least some optimism that no matter how hard the times, there are better days ahead. And if not optimism, then hope, the spring of hope that God has not abandoned us. And as people of God, we are still called to speak good news to the poor, proclaim freedom for the prisoners, and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free. Will we carry through the gate those words of Leviticus 25, those words inscribed on the Liberty Bell that say, "Proclaim liberty throughout the land and to all the inhabitants thereof"? On this day, we celebrate the 244th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Can we echo the words of John Adams that said, "I am well aware of the toil and blood and treasure it will cost us to maintain this declaration and support and defend these states. Yet through all this gloom, all the gloom, I see the ravishing light and glory. I can see that the end is worth all the means. This is our day of deliverance." Can we hang on to both this nation's pain and its glory, that no person remains standing outside the gate of this country's future? You know, there is much to celebrate today, and there is much to lament. Will your celebrating cause you to be ignorant of those who have difficulty celebrating, who because of their skin color, their sexuality, their gender, their economic status, are denied basic freedoms pronounced in the Declaration of Independence and preserved in the Constitution? Or will your lamenting make you blind to the sheer majesty of a country whose freedoms are unparalleled, thereby forgetting the holy privilege it is to be an American citizen? My dear friends, you can hang on to both celebration and lament at the same time. That paradoxical injunction, as does this verse from America the Beautiful. O beautiful for patriot dream that sees beyond the years, thine alabaster cities gleam undimmed by human tears. America, America, God, mend thine every flaw, confirm thy soul in self-control, thy liberty in law. Amen.